Fantastic. Thank you very much. From my side, of course, first of all, thank you very much for joining. Really appreciate having the ability to do a presentation at the New Stars of Data. My presentation is called Drillthrough, Why and How and When. So basically drill-throughs with lots of questions that I plan on. I hope I can answer and give you some insights into my opinions on this and the good points, the bad points, what they're good for, all this, because of course we'll get that as we make our way through the presentation. Before we do that, I'll do a little bit about myself first. I know you're not here to learn about me, but rather you're here to learn about drill-throughs, but briefly who I am. My name is Ben Ferry. I have lived in Germany since 2006. I'm located in Berlin, originally from the northeast of England. I work as a senior data analyst here in Berlin. These things that you can see on the screen now are not related to anything I'm saying. That's more my online identity, which is Power BI Guy. You can find me on YouTube at Power BI Guy and Twitter, and I have my website. Yeah, it's powerbiguy.co, not .com. That's not a typo. .com is expensive, so I went with .co. On my YouTube channel, I talk frequently. I have like weekly chats with people in the community, and I post videos about a whole range of things. So that's it. That's me. But I won't bore you with that too much. We'll get to the point, which is, of course, drill-throughs. Cool. So, what? The extra question. My title of my presentation is Why and How and When. I didn't include a what, but I thought let's talk about the what first, because if you've never heard of a drill through or if you've never used a drill through, it's probably best to clarify at that point. Otherwise, what I'm talking about just sounds pretty much like nonsense. So let's jump quickly to a report, and I will choose this one. So this is a report that I've built purely, or adapted, I should say, purely for this this presentation. So it looks a bit strange, there's big blank spots and stuff, but whatever. This is what we're using, and I hope it's kind of clear enough to get my points across. The data inside, or wondering why all these values are there, it's based on fantasy football. But drill throughs, what are they doing? If I have a data point that I'm interested in, if I'm looking at my report and I want to see more about a specific value, how do I do that? Well, I do that in this way through a drill through. I simply go to the point I'm looking at, I can right click, I go to drill through, and it takes me to a whole new page of data about that data point that I've clicked on. That's what a drill through is. So I'm really making my way through the data. I am choosing one data point and I'm filtering through. So reports have many filters. You have your page level filters, your report level filters, a visual level filter. The drill through is also a type of filter, but instead of just choosing or reducing it to one data point, you're reducing the data point and navigating to a new page. You can also navigate to a new report with a drill through, but for this presentation, I'm going to talk only about drilling through within a report. So in a purely factual way, that's what a drill through filter does. So just give me 1 second. Why? So this is the first question that I've actually included within my title, why and how and when. So why do I want to ask the question why? This is what why means. Why do I want to talk about them? Why do we need them? Well, the reason I want to talk about them, actually the basic reason, is when I was going to submit my session to the New Stars of Data, I spoke to a colleague, and the first thing that my colleague said was like, why didn't you speak about drill throughs? Which I found was quite surprising, because I would never have thought about that, but I thought it was a great point, because in his words, roughly, and I agree, I use drill throughs pretty often when I'm creating my reports. I think they're a great functionality. We'll get to why I think that later on, but I think they're a great functionality. But also I think they're quite underutilized. And that was also the point that he made as well. I'm not saying that no one ever uses them. That's of course not true. But for what they are, for what they can do, I don't really see them used that often within reports. I think also they're powerful. I think they present a really good choice or a really good functionality to analyze data for your users. And because they're powerful, that kind of leads me back to the point. Based on how good they are and what you can do, they should be used more. So why aren't they used more? So this is the kind of things that kind of led me to choosing why I wanted to talk about drill-throughs. But other than those two things, the fact that they're powerful, the fact that they're underutilized, they can also be confusing. And that's a point I'm going to get to in a couple of slides, but it's also one of the reasons that this presentation exists, because they can be a confusing functionality for a number of reasons. The other why is, why do we need them? Like, why are they important? So for that, I'll kind of go back to the my report that I have published, and we can have a look at the why part. For me, what they do is they offer a nice ability to have a deeper dive into a data point. I've already mentioned that, but also this concept of storytelling, I would say. So if I'm doing my work, if I'm creating a report, I should say, if I'm creating a report, what I tend to do is I'll speak to the person I'm building the report for, the stakeholders, however number there are, and I'll ask them these questions, like, of course, all the basic questions about, the data, the requirements, all this sort of thing, but how they actually do their job. Yeah. What are the first things that you look at? What are the first questions that you ask yourself when you're looking at specific data points? And for me, we need them for that purpose, because if they say, I do this, 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 and this, I go here and I'll say, okay, so this person here, Haaland, he's got a lot of points. Okay, that's good to know. So what about his total without his best game week? Okay, so still pretty high. What's his highest game week return? He's still top. What's his previous game week? So for all of these things, these are the initial things that I look at. And then I ask myself more questions. And then with a drill through, instead of just applying a slicer or click on a button to go to a different page, I can then just drill through, and I can kind of start to navigate through my report. And the way I navigate is also kind of mapping how I'm asking my own questions about the data. Also from this point as well, if I had set it up, I haven't, but if I had, I could also have another drill through. So you can't just drill through from one page, you can drill through from wherever you are within the report. If I wanted to now, I could drill through to only games that were done at home, right click there and drill through. It's not going to work because I haven't set it up. But this is the thing, not just going from one point or applying a slicer or going from one page to a different page and then reapplying slices, though I know you can sync slices. Really just kind of following a workflow. This is why I think we need them, and this is why I think they offer a really good choice of functionality when we're building our reports, and it's something that we really should consider utilizing when you actually start to create something. So that, for me, that's the why. Yeah. And then how. So we had the why should you use them, and how. So why am I asking the question how? Because surely it's quite a basic thing to do, like to set up a drill through is quite basic now. And yeah, it is actually, it is the basic functionality, or the basic setup, I should say. It is a basic thing to do, and we can look at how we do that. It doesn't take long at all. So here, if I go to my PBIX and where I'm actually building the report, if I follow, I hope you can see the screen okay. I know it's quite small. So if I want to kind of drill through to this page here, you can see here that this is where my drill through lies. Okay, so I'm just going to remove all these things, and I'm going to set up my drill through again so you can see how it's done, though it's very straightforward. It says here, add all drill through fields here, and I'm just going to go and then add it there, add drill through fields, and that's it done. So yes, how to do it is a very basic thing. I can add my my drill through field, and then I make the choice, keep all the filters or not, which basically means when I'm navigating through this report, if I drill through here, do I want to keep all the slices that are applied, or I just want to keep just this drill through thing? So that's the how of it. on a very basic level, yeah, it's nice and straightforward. But that also, the creation of a drill through then kind of starts to bring up some problems. And now kind of what I want to focus on when I talk about using drill throughs. Excuse me. So the two types of problems. We have builder problems and we have user problems. The builder problems, of course, in my head are the problems that we have when we are creating the report. The problems that we have to consider when we're setting up the functionality of drill throughs, not just dragging and dropping that one value. Actually, what are we going to encounter, or what we have to think about, what would we have to decide upon when using drill throughs? So the first point I'm going to make is going to sound really quite small and unimportant, but it leads on to a bigger point, I promise. So bear with me. So I'm going to go back to my PBIX and I'm going to kind of talk about how I feel that when you're using your when you're using drill throughs, I'm of the opinion, you might disagree, but I'm of the opinion, when I can find the report somewhere, here it is, there it is, that it has quite a legacy look to it. It kind of seems like it's a functionality that hasn't had the care, the love, the attention, which I think it should have, because obviously I'm quite a big proponent of using them. This is why I'm talking about them here today. If you look at the things that exist now in Power BI, so I'm not sure how long any of you have been using Power BI here, people who are watching this now or whenever. But if you look at the things that have been updated, the obvious choice, because we're talking about drill throughs, which, as I said before, are a type of filter. This filter pane is, for me, a perfect example, because this filter pane didn't used to exist. I can't remember when it was added, a couple of years ago now for sure, but this filter pane never used to be there. All these filters, so again, report, page, visual level filter, they were all things that were kind of here. Within the visualization pane, you had this block of filters all here. And at the very bottom, you had your drill throughs. But that's been updated. So now when you look for all your filters, you'll find them, of course, within your filter pane, as you'd expect. Though drill throughs are kind of still sitting down there. And in my opinion, that kind of creates a problem because they're kind of easy to overlook. Just as users aren't great at sometimes at seeing information within a report, which I'll get to later, sometimes people's eyes just aren't drawn to specific areas. A perfect example for me is that this search bar at the top, I literally didn't know it existed for a year. And I use Power BI every single day. And I just never saw the search pane. One day I looked at it, I was like, what's that? Because my eyes had never gone there, because I never needed to look there, you know? So it's easy to overlook this functionality. So I understand that this is a basic thing, but I think if you look also at the visualization pane itself, if you look at how the visualization pane has been recently updated, love it or loathe it, it has been updated, and drill throughs are still just kind of sitting there, same as they've looked for quite a long time now. For me, this presents kind of like this illusion, or this idea that maybe they're not given the love that they should be given. But that also has an effect on the functionality of drill throughs. So now I'm going to talk about inserting a type of button. Now, I feel strongly about this, so I'll try not to go on about it too long. So this update, which I think was around about December 2021, so a decent amount of time back, you have the ability to insert a button and then a page navigation button, which was an update that I was really happy about, because I use buttons a lot. Page navigation is a fantastic thing. I have opinions about that as well. Works really well. So yeah, you have this page navigation thing. This for me is a prime example of a problem that you have to consider when using drill throughs, because it's been overlooked in the functionality of what is built into Power BI. A lot of the things that I say in this presentation, really honestly, if tomorrow Microsoft updated all the drill through functionality, and everything that I say in this presentation is then completely redundant, that's fine by me, okay? Because it's not like I want these problems to exist. And Power BI gets randomly updated sometimes, and things that you never thought about are sometimes gone and better. I hope that's the case. I really do, because I love its page navigation. However, if you go here to say pages, show hidden pages or show tooltip pages, these are your two options. Now, when are you ever going to want to show a tooltip page when you're building page navigation? I would say if you do want to do that, it's a very, very edge case, and I would say it's basically never. And because generally, if you're using page navigation, you're going to hide your pages, as I always do, because I want to use Page Navigator. My option is to show hidden pages. So I say don't show hidden pages. So then I only have this one big button. My point being is I don't have the option to switch off the drill through page buttons. So now this is for me a classic or an important builder problem, because I feel like I'm presented with the option that I can either use drill through or I can use page navigation, because to have a button to go directly to a drill through page without actually drilling through is not what they're designed for. It doesn't work that way. Again, you could potentially have a page where you can do both, but it's more often than not, I'd say like 9 times out of 10, your drill through page is just to drill through to, not to navigate to. So yeah, it's a shame because it's a great functionality. Drill through is a great functionality, and they kind of don't play well together. A workaround to that is horrible, but it exists, and I'll try to show you, I think, on this report that I have here. So in this report is pretty busy, so you have to excuse the craziness of it and the colors. This thing that I have here is page navigation, and I have drill throughs on this report as well. It's pretty much the same report that I had before, but I've just slimmed it down for the presentation. If I go to this selection percentage analysis page, you'll see, you can't see actually. Well, I'll just tell you then that what I've done on this, actually you can see it here, that's good. What I've done in this report is that I've used this page navigation, but I've simply hid the 2 drill through pages behind a visualization on each page, which is ludicrous that you have to do that, but it is a way of working around that particular problem. You can use them, but you have to just hide them behind a visualization. It's a bit weird that you have to do that, but it's something to consider. So that's, for me, one of the first builder problems, if you will. Another thing which I think needs to be addressed are the number of choices. So choice is a good thing, for sure. But let's just have a look at what I'm talking about, and then I'll expand on my point. So we have to choose a consistent UI. So a consistency that allows our users to navigate through the ports in a way that makes sense to them. Yeah, we have to convey a clear message. So when I'm when I'm setting up my drill throughs, I have another choice to make, because there are different ways you can drill through. The first way, I'm just going to show you what they are. The first way, we've already looked at that. I went here, I had to right click to drill through, and I can do the same thing here as well, right click to drill through, and I think also in this one as well, yeah. So you can right click, you drill through, and then you go to your drill through page. That's the first, and that's pretty sure that was the first way, and it used to be the only way you could do it. It was always a right click and you drill through to the other page. The other option, which to be fair is probably the most straightforward or the easiest, is the standard Power BI tooltip, which will have this big drill through when you click on it that way. So that's the second way. So the first way is a right click, you get this. The second way is just a normal hover, which brings up this. And the third way is you can have a drill through button. And the way a drill through button works, simply you click on your value and then it activates the button, which says test. Didn't say that correctly. Oops. It clicks on the button, and then when I click on that button, it goes through the same page. So as you can see, all three methods have the same result. You end up on the drill through page that you've assigned as the drill through page. So to have choice, yeah, great. But I would also argue that too many options is sometimes a bad thing, because that makes it less clear especially if you consider you work in a company and you have multiple people building reports. So if one person, chooses one way, another person chooses another way, it's harder for the user to kind of understand, right? And of course, design is important. We know this. I mean, if you look at Power BI report design, there's lots of people talking about a multitude of different things, be it DAX, data modeling, and Power Query, all these wonderful and fantastically enjoyable things that we have in Power BI. But design is also an important element, because it's the design that the user sees. It's design that the user interacts with. So this is what we're looking at when we're talking about a builder problem. Am I choosing the right design to allow my user to actually drill through? Am I always using the same choice? Should I, on one page, if I've chosen on one page to drill through this way, then that should be the way I'm drill through on all the time. Otherwise, it's too much. So those, I would say, are the main builder problems. There are probably one or two more, but I don't want to feel like I'm complaining too much. As I say, choice is great, but because there is a lot of choice there, we have to be careful when we're making our design choices. The next thing I want to look at is the other side, which is the user problems. Yeah. So for me, this is the biggest issue for sure, because when we're talking about these builder problems, generally speaking, people who are building Power BI reports, they know what they're doing, they know what they're talking about, and even if you're just learning from scratch, you're accessing all these different learning resources, you're reading your blog posts, all this sort of thing. For users, it's different, because a user could have very little information about Power BI and could continue to have very little information about Power BI, because that's very reasonable, because it's not their job, right? So awareness for the user is a complex thing. If you consider even that I'm sitting here giving this talk about drill throughs and do this, do that, this is an option, this is an option, the user might not even know what a drill through is, not even heard the word drill through. Yeah. When I started using Power BI, I'd never heard the word before. I don't come from a data background. I studied history and politics at university, and I discovered Power Query and then Power BI, and that changed my career. I've been doing that since 2017. So in 2017, I learned what a drill through was. So a user who is in a completely non-data department, who is just accessing the data because that's to look at some numbers is their job, they won't know what a drill through is, or they might not. Even I would say a fairly good Excel user may not know what a drill through is. You can create a lot in Excel and never encounter or have to know what a drill through does. So, whilst before I was talking about builder problems, I was talking about how we convey that message, how we can let the user know what is happening. And now I'm going to look at those same problems through like different eyes, if you will, the eyes of a user, because those are the people who use the reports, right? How do they know what to do for each possible way to drill through? So if we're going to go back to this report, I'm going to have a look at those things again and discuss some of the issues that you might encounter when you're using them. So if I go to the first point, which is this, and for me, again, I maintain it. It's the best way. It's the easiest way for sure to drill through. If I hover my mouse over I get the drill through. So I'm saying that's a good thing. What I think is strange, what I think is an interesting, I'll put it nicely, an interesting design choice is that I have to wait that amount of time. So I don't want to, well, I do want to sit here and complain about what is potentially just half a second. I did have the opportunity to speak to someone. I was happy. I went to this Power BI Next Step a few weeks ago, and I was happy to meet someone who works in Microsoft, one of the designers, and he explained the reason for that. I'll be honest, I forgot the reason. I really did. So it's nice to know that there is a reason, but I still think it's a bit confusing because a couple of things. You're basing that on the idea, first of all, that the user is going to move the cursor there. So fine. They probably will, because people tend to move the cursor where the eyes go. That's pretty standard. However, a user can do this, can do that, and that, and that, and that, and this, and this, and this, without ever actually seeing this option to drill through, you know? So you can easily navigate through this and say, I mean, what I might do is say, okay, what's that? No, it's just that number again, right? So if it's just that number again, I don't want it, whatever, I'm done, I'm bored. So I move my mouse away. And then you're never going to see that drill through option is there. So that would be great. It would be perfect if it was just there straight away, and I wouldn't be sitting here complaining about it. But to be fair, it works somewhat well. However, I very rarely use that sort of tooltip when I'm building my reports. I don't think they are particularly great. I don't think that add a lot of insight to the tooltip. I know you can add more fields, but then it just becomes like a list of numbers. And I think that's kind of counterintuitive to what a tooltip should be there to do, which is to enhance the data, right? So I have this tooltip here, which for me is, I mean, you might think it's too much information. I totally understand that. But I play fantasy football and I want to know which players to pick, even though I'm pretty bad at fantasy football, to be honest. But this is what I want to do. I wanted to design something where I can see, okay, let's just focus on Haaland because he's pretty awesome. Hover my mouse across there, and if it works, please, thank you. I can see more information, basically. I can see when he got those points. I can see a history of these points scored. I can see upcoming fixtures, all that kind of. That for me is a more usable tooltip. However, again, kind of the same as when we're talking about before when I was going on about the page navigation buttons. Yeah, it's a design choice, because now if I use this type of tooltip, what do I not have? I don't have this thing that says drill through, which is gone, right? I have it here, so I don't have it. So if my design choice is to say, okay, in this report, I just want to drill through this way. That's how I want to drill through in this report. The user can easily come here and say, okay, so I can't use this one to drill through because I don't have that little pop-up thing. And again, unless they know, unless they've been told by someone that they have to right-click to navigate, they're not going to know, because right-clicking isn't a natural thing that you do. Clicking is more usual to get your cross highlighting, but a right-click, I don't know. It doesn't seem that natural to me. So that's something that you have to consider as well. Like, how do you, when you're designing your report, you have to think, okay, do I have drill throughs? Yes and no. How do I want to drill through? And if I have tooltips, therefore, if I have that tooltip, how am I going to then allow the user to know that they can right-click to get more data? So that for me is quite an issue, because I'm losing this functionality, which is quite helpful for my users who, again, might not know what a drill through is, what a drill through does, and how you can access this information. Bear in mind that when you build a drill through, drill through page, I should say, if I go to that page again now, all this information on this page, which is a bit of a, okay, not my favorite page, but whatever, it's there. All the information that you build on this page is really helpful, right? You're not building a drill through page just for the fun of it. This is important analysis for whomever. If, of course, you're working internally and you're building a report for whomever, and they have lots of financial data or whatever data for their job, this is there. It's designed to help them. You're not doing it because it's such good fun. I mean, it is good fun as well. But, it's there to be used. So it's a massive shame if through these things that I'm talking about now, people are never, ever going to see any of this information, right? Because they simply don't know that it's there. And yeah, you might design it with your end user, with your stakeholder or whomever, and they know it's there, and their immediate team does. So depending on the number of people who are using your report, if you have like 5-10 people, okay, this is a lot easier. You can set up a call or whatever, send them an email which they may read. I don't know. But if you have a user group of hundreds, to get this message across, it becomes very, very difficult. So you want to ensure that what you're building is clear and can be used and accessed by everyone. Which brings me on to the final functionality that we talked about before, which was this whole clicking thing, so the button. I'll be honest, it's like probably my least favorite way to drill through. I know there's it works well, but it's not something that I particularly enjoy using. The main reason, I think, is because, I know we click on values to cross filter. I get that, but I don't think that it works well to have two different elements that you have to use to drill through to. And I'm probably being a bit too picky here. I concede that point. I do. But I like to be really critical when I think about these things, again, because the way I tend to work is that I consider the end user who has the least amount of knowledge. Because I think that is fair, because as I said before, it's not everyone's job to know Power BI. It's their job, yes, to adapt to a new way of getting your data, but unless it's obvious, unless it's very in their face, they might never see it, and I think that's quite reasonable. So anyway, the button. When you have a button, obviously you can, which I'll show you in a second, you can set it up to say different things. But unless I click on a value like this one here, it's not going to be capable of doing anything. And no matter how clear you make a message, how clear you think the message is, it might not be clear to other people. And I brought up this report now, which, and this is the Contoso skateboard store report, which you've probably seen from the Microsoft videos or whatever. This to me is a great example because, a great example of something that I don't like, with all due respect to whoever built it, because it's a great report. I think it looks awesome. I love how eye-catching it is, and you have your icons which bring attention to your sales data, and then you have your button. You can get to your returns data. All looks very good, very nice, and it's designed to be eye-catching, right? Because this is how often reports are built. It's designed so your eyes are drawn to certain places. They're drawn to here so you can get your sales and your customer sales. And then you have this nice big colorful bar, and then you have this down the bottom as well. And that shows us our sales by product. But here it says select a product to enable drill through. This is nice information, good, but it's probably the thing on the entire report that stands out the least, right? And it's the thing my eyes aren't going to go to because of how nice the rest of the report is. So when I click on this, and now it says drill through to detail, that works very well. Now I have this big page full of information. So great. And my point here really is that, again, as I said before, if this isn't something that stands out, this indication to the end user isn't something that is really not screaming, but clearly indicating that something can happen here. If you click on one of these things, then it can be quite easily lost. And that's a shame, because you're losing the potential for a lot of analysis. And at the same time, you got to think, okay, but I want it to stand out, but I don't want it to stand out too much. So it's really difficult, I think, to get that right. You might disagree, but I think it's difficult to really have that balance between, does this thing stand out so people can see it, read it, understand that there's more at play here, there's more functionality waiting for me, but also doesn't distract from the actual analysis itself, right? On top of that, frequently when we build reports, space on the page is sometimes not that easy to come by. On this report that you can see here, it is. And the reasons for that is because I've used it to create a minimal amount of data. On the other hand, the other report that I have here, that's probably an example of too much data on one page. I totally understand that. So on this page, to have a drill through button would be a lot harder because there's just not much left there because I've kind of probably packed this too full of data on a first page. So another thing to consider, do I actually have space for a button that really is just there for something that I could do with just a right click? So how do we know? How do we allow the user to know, and how basically is the user going to know without us kind of like pushing it down their face, One last point I'll make about the buttons is that I'll just go the pbix now for this, and I'll get rid of this. So on this one, where you can see when I click on it, actually no, I'll go back to the report, sorry. When I click on it, you can see that it says, click on play to activate drill through, and then it says click here to drill through to more data for LTROSOD, or here for Foden. So this, what it says here, I'm not sure if you're aware, but I'll say briefly, it's not going to by standard actually name the value here. You have to set that up with a measure. So you can, when you're building your drill through button, and I'll just do it really quickly because it's pretty straightforward. If I just add any button here, and it's going to be pretty basic. Here you go, action, and then it's your drill through button, and then you choose the destination. So I'm going to again choose play a drill through. This is what you're going to do with the style. So you can choose to say what text it says in default. So this is why it changes. For example, here on this one, when I hover over, the reason it changes is because I've got on hover show the word test. So I can change that now, and so I'll do whatever, test 2, I don't care. And you can see that disabled, it says click on player to activate drill through. So now it says click on player to activate drill through. And the apply settings to default. So it's weird that it's called default for me in this case because that happens, but it doesn't matter. That is then controlled by a measure. So to make it very, very clear, that's not something that's out of the box, if you will. You have to create a measure to do that. It's not a complex measure, but it's not going to by default tell you the value you've clicked on. So that's something also to consider when you're using your buttons as well. So if those are the problems, if those are the issues that you have, how can you get around them? How can you help the user? How can you ensure that those essentially aren't problems? I'm of the opinion that you can't make them not problems. I think they're always going to be somewhat of a problem, I will say. But I think there are things that we could do, add to our reports, add to our design, that when we choose to use a drill through, because of that wonderful functionality that they bring to our reports, this ability to kind of go, okay, I want to see more data, and then I see more data. When you choose to use them, there are design elements that you can consider on top of just, the drill throughs or the visualizations themselves that are going to make it very, well, not very helpful, but easier to get this information across. Because what we're talking about now is basically conveying information to our users. One of the ways that I like to do this is to really just show them as soon as they open the report, because the report that you can see now, and I think also this larger report, both of them, when you first open this report, this is actually not the view that you'll see. The view that you'll see is this here. which I activated now with a button, but if I were to refresh this page, it would open the report in this state. And that is an idea that I had. I'm by no means saying this is perfect and it should be done and it's wonderful and it'll work on every occasion. It's just an idea that I had to try and get some information to the end user before they actually start interacting with the report. Yeah. So this report here is published to web, so anyone can access it, which means people who don't even know what Power BI is, have never heard of this business intelligence world or whatever, can access this report. If you play fantasy football, you can use this report. Fine. So how are those people going to know what a drill through is? That's probably an extreme example, but similarly, someone who works, in whatever department in the company that you're working for, or a customer who has not a great knowledge, how do we get the information across that you can do things that aren't very, very obvious for when you're first looking at a report? And this is the idea that I had, to have like an open page or an image that sits on top of the entire page. And it's just a bookmark. It's a bookmark that looks like this. And this is the standard view for this report. So when you open this report, the first thing you're going to see is this big, you can right click on any player name or team to drill through to more information. I also have this for a bit of shameless self-promotion. So of course, if you're building internal reports, you're not going to have that sort of thing. And this is just for me to kind of get traffic across. So this, for me, this is helpful. It's still not ideal by any stretch of the imagination, because even the wording that I've chosen, if I look at it now, isn't great, because again, you can right click on any player name or team to drill through to more information. I don't like the fact that it just says drill through, because it's not really clear what that drill through actually does. So I could say you can right click on any player name or team to access more information via drill through, because you still have to use the word drill through. That's the thing, especially if you're using right click, because if I go, okay, now let me see the report. If I were to then, if I said you can right click to see more information, I'd be like, where? So you have to use the word drill through, because it's always referred to as a drill through. What I do like about this idea is that because the information is displayed straight away before you've even ever seen the report, what the user might do is immediately do that. Like they straight away, they'll test that to see what the hell I'm talking about. So okay, and I'll go right click, and then okay, and I go okay, cool. Or they can say okay, I don't care, but they'll see that it exists. They know that it's there, and then they can use this home button or whatever. So that, to me, if it drives the user to immediately to test this drill through functionality, that to me is like an immediate win, because the user straight away knows what a drill through is, what it does. Yeah. So again, the drawback of that is that is going to load every single time you open the report. So if you've opened this report like 15 times, you're going to see it every single time. If you open this report every single day, you're going to see it. So that's something to consider, that it might start to annoy your users who have a lot of experience. So they didn't have a lot of experience 2 months ago, but now they do, because they've been using it for a while, and that page still exists. So that's something to consider. Again, not a perfect solution, but in some situations that might be quite helpful. I've also added that as a button within this report. So if people are like, what was that information? I've kind of clicked away or whatever, they can then always just go back to it by clicking that. So that's, I would consider, one potential option of how how the report builders can allow the users to have more information about the very existence of what a drill through is and does. Another thing to consider is if you're looking at the buttons that I spoke about before. I think I have this page here, and yeah, this page. So this is very much focused on one particular thing, which is just a percentage and against points. It doesn't matter. My point that I'm trying to make is this: if I'm using a button for my drill through now, so now as we're talking about the different choices, be it right click or this standard functionality with the drill through drop down thing, If I'm using a button, which is what I'm using on this page, if I click this, my button is down here. If I click this and this, especially given the choice of color, would the user even see that? It's possible. I think, to be honest, quite likely in this report because it's quite a distance away. It's very possible that the user could be clicking just to do this cross filtering and not even notice what's happening here, you know? So positioning of buttons is also something that I think would need to be considered, because I know you can design reports in many, many different ways, but if you have a functionality as specific as drill through and a button that is really only useful when you click on a value, to me, it makes much more sense if this button isn't kind of like down here where it potentially can't be seen, but rather the button is near the values that you're actually clicking on, which is why in this case, I thought I would bring this button up here and put it in the middle, because now if I click on this, it's really, really obvious that something's happened because the color has changed very dramatically. So the color of the visual, the color of the text, also maybe less obvious, but also what the text is has changed. But again, this is why I like to have the player name within the button, within that measure that I was talking about before. So the placement of the button, instead of putting it somewhere, maybe, I don't know, on the right-hand side where your page navigation might be, to make it quite prominent in the report so that the users can see, okay, this is where this thing is. That really helps. Again, problem there is, do you have space? You might not, you might, we'll see. But if you do choose to use buttons to drill through, make sure that they are in a space that makes sense and is in the eye line of your users. Yeah. Another option, probably the most basic one, to be honest, is if you see this visual here where I've failed to spell the word drill through correctly, right click to drill through. That should say right click to drill through. That's an option, to be honest. To simply put in the title of every visual, right click to drill through. I don't like this at all. I'm offering it as a solution because I think it is an option, but to have in your visual titles, which generally should be quite concise and quite clear about what is in the visual, to have this kind of like extra text, right click to drill through, I don't know. It's not the best. It's pretty clear, and it means you don't have to have this big page thing at the front. But what are your options? Would you put it on every single visualization? Would you have it on just certain visualizations, even though, for example, here, I have this transfer balance, right click to drill through. This one here doesn't say right click to drill through, even though you can. So would the user think I can only right click to drill through on this one? Because of that, possibly. They might then think, oh, I wonder if I can right click on there. That's also possible. So it gets the message across, but I don't think it's a particularly nice way of getting that information. Especially when a lot of the time what you're doing with your titles of your visuals is actually making them quite dynamic. If I go back to this one, for example, to make it a bit tidier. So here, top 10 players by total points. If I change to 15, it's going to say top 15, and then top 15 by total. I mean, that title's already pretty long and not so good, to be honest. So to add something like right click to drill through to that would be really excessive. And yeah, so it certainly gets the message across, but I think it would make your report look a little bit messy and take away the message of what should be quite a clear title within your report. There is another option, and I'll fully admit now, this one that I'm going to say is like totally niche, and it can only be used in very specific circumstances. I'm not sure if any of you were watching the presentation this morning about Deneb. which was a very cool presentation. Really enjoyed it. I love using Deneb as well. And one idea that I had, and this might be like ludicrous to you, which I fully understand, was that what if you could change what the cursor looks like if the drill to functionality is there? So that's kind of what I kind of started to play around with. So in this visual here, this is all Deneb, yeah? And what I did was I kind of changed it. See if you see how the changer, yeah, the changer, no. See how the cursor kind of like changes and move on. My idea, my thought was there that if you could convey the message that when the cursor looks like this, then that means you can drill through. But again, I know that's really niche because you can, first of all, you can only do it with Deneb. Though it is fun to make reports only from Deneb, it's not going to be something that a lot of people are doing at all. But then also that's another message that you have to convey. You have to let the user know what that cursor actually means, which still can be done. But are you just kind of creating more problems or more confusion? To be honest, probably. Though I do think it's quite a fun option. But I would say, generally speaking, those are the things that I tend to use to allow the user or give information to the user, which is a button that has dynamic text and a button that is located in a very clear place within my report. This initial page view, I think for me, that is the best way of doing it. Again, you wouldn't have stuff like this. You would just simply have, right click here to drill through. And I'm also saying any player name or team name. So they know basically that when you see anything that's a name of a player or a team, they can right click to do it. I think that to me is the fastest way to get that message across. So I think those are the ways that the builder can actually help the user understand what they can do. Because as I say, I think it would be such a shame if this functionality was completely lost. The final thing, which if I go back to my, the final thing, if I go back to my title, which was the why and the how and the when. So I've discussed those points. So the how, which was the builder problems, the user problems, the user problems being the things that we just discussed and how we can help the user as a builder. How do we help the user? The final question was the when. And the when is really basically, when do you need a drill through and when do you not need a drill through? Because it's not the only option to get more data. There are different ways of using your data and navigating through your data. So when you don't need them. So in this report, I've mentioned this tooltip before. So if you have a report and the amount of data that you have, the number of ways you can, the number of dimensions in which you can display that data aren't huge, then it's possible that you don't need a drill through. If you can build a tooltip that looks like that, and that's enough information for your user, then you don't always need to use a drill through. You can use a tooltip like this, because quite often when I use this report to make choices for my terrible fantasy football team, if I'm in a hurry, I can just do that and say, okay, I see this person performs well. I can say, what do I need? Okay, I need a defender because my defenders are not good right now. This person's top. Okay, so I go over and I can say, okay, this person's got the most points. However, he's got some weeks where he got no points, some weeks where he's got very poor points, and one week where he's got a negative point. That's not good. So I can just then say, okay, my total without the best game week. I click on that, and that takes away this value at a lower point. I can then say, okay, now who's top? And I say, okay, that maybe looks better. I'm not sure. This is just, your opinions on how do you select your team. But basically, you can then, through that, say, okay, this person for me seems to be a better fit. Is upcoming fixtures. I like how they look. Based on that, I'm going to quickly put that person in, and that's what I want. So if the level of analysis that you need doesn't require this multitude of other dimensions, then sure, you don't need a tooltip. It's not something that is required for every single report. You can also just say, why not just use slices? Okay, fair enough. Again, if you don't want to show many new dimensions, you don't have to use a tooltip. You can navigate within one page. And in some regards, I can see why staying in one page is sometimes a nicer thing to do, because through moving page, it might kind of make the user think, okay, so where am I and what am I looking at now? Especially if they haven't used the functionality before, or especially if there's no need for it. And that's the thing. If there's no need, having the drill through itself might cause more confusion. Of course, you can just use slicers like I've done before, but a slicer isn't, of course, going to change the dimensions. It's simply going to filter down to get rid of some of your data. I mean, you know how slicers work. We also have much newer functionalities, such as parameters, these field parameters, which we have now. These are something that was always possible with disconnected tables, but they're a lot more accessible now. So if you have, for example, I'll try and zoom in a little bit here, but it's not working, sorry. If you have now, for example, a field parameter setup, and what you want to do is, oops, sorry about this. And what you want to do is say, okay, this is my total points. I want to show that by team. I want to show it by position. I want to show it by round. Then yes, in that situation, you can use your field parameters, because again, you're not kind of taking a journey through your data. You're just kind of like showing the same data in a different way. With a field parameter, you can choose the value. You can also, again, choose the dimension, but it's still very much looking at similar concept of data. What I said at the start of this presentation remains, for me, this is also the case now. The strength of a drill through is basically not just filtering data. It's not just, okay, I want to see that by like one or two more dimensions. It's actually saying, I have seen that, but I don't want to see that data anymore. I want to enhance that data with like new data. And this is also what we're doing. We're saying, okay, I've seen that. That looks good. So show me more, show me different stuff. So now I've got, assists, minutes. So of course, if you're using financial data or whatever, you can show us by whatever different product categories and that kind of thing. So if you don't need that, you don't need a drill through. But if you want to enhance your data, then I would suggest you use a drill through, especially given the fact that you can also just, so now if I said, okay, round instead of 1 through 9, I'll say round 1 through 5. And then when I drill through, where I finally get there, now I see around 1 through 5 because I've filtered that on the first page. So that's also quite a nice thing that you can do with your drill throughs, of course. Also, of course, there's an option now, again, whether you like it or not, there's an option that in certain situations, your users can change the visualization that you've chosen in the service. That's a function that you have to switch on. Yeah, not a big fan of that. I would simply say if the users are changing the type of visualization that you have used, perhaps you should have just used a more appropriate visualization. But that is an option. So my point is simply that you don't, of course, always need to use a drill through. However, in the situations where you want to guide your users through the data and allow them to get to deeper and deeper levels of analysis, then a drill through is a great thing to consider and to use, but be aware of the problems that kind of brings with it. All these other things that we've spoken about regarding the different visual aspects and conveying that message to the user. I think from my side, that's pretty much everything that I had planned to present. I would say, if you have any questions, I haven't been reading the chat, to be honest. So if there are any questions, please feel free to ask them now. I'll say thank you to Frank Geisler for being my mentor through this. It was very, very helpful. I really appreciate it. And he gave me some great feedback and calmed me down.